now live on YouTube.
Right. Thank you, Joseph. Resources and Delivering Value Scrutiny Board. Our remote meeting, our virtual meeting for Tuesday, 23rd of June 2020. Do we have any apologies for absence, please, Paul?
Madam Chairman, there are no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary or conflicts of interest? As and when, thank you. Any questions or deputations, please?
Madam Chairman, there are no deputations or questions.
Now we have the minutes of our previous meeting on the 26th of May, and these are on pages 5 to 12. So they're pretty intensive, which is only right and proper. Does anybody want to raise anything that they can't agree with? Can we all agree these minutes then, please? Sorry, can you have a wave or something if you agree? Thank you. Paul, can we see everybody?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have seen everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we turn to the body of the report, which is item 6, which is...
Sorry, Madam Chairman, there's a slight confusion. Item 5 is Cabinet Member for Resources, Councillor Slade, who's giving a verbal presentation on his priorities for the forthcoming year.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm sorry, Bob. Right, please. This is Councillor Bob Slade, and he's going to give us a report, a verbal report on the resources and his plans for this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I'm supported here this evening, at least by Sam Gilbert and Paul Johnson, who's the Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Resources. I'm going to give a summary on my key priorities for the coming year from my forward plan, and hopefully give members some detail, and of course subsequently answer any questions that may arise from the presentation. It's a couple of pages, Madam Chairman, but I will be reading it, so if my eyes glance away, then that's where I am. So clearly we've had the whole issue, the financial implications of COVID-19. A comprehensive report to last week's Cabinet meeting set out a full year estimate of the cost of COVID-19. This report estimated the full year impact through new service pressures and lost income will exceed the government funding we have received by over £18 million. I'll be working with the Director of Resources and Deputy Chief Executive throughout the year to look at how these costs might be mitigated. This will clearly include lobbying government for further funding going forward. Last week's full Cabinet approved the continuation of the Budget Strategy Group to make budget recommendations for 21-22 and an updated medium-term financial strategy for 21-22 to 23-24. This will of course need to take account of the full implications of COVID, as just mentioned. We expect a spending review later this year and now expect our 100% business rates pilot to continue into 21-22. In light of recent challenges, we need to ensure that the Council continues to have a sustainable financial position. Madam Chair, all Cabinet members will be working on COVID recovery across their individual portfolios going forward. I now move to some of our other projects and strategies. Town Centre and Property Investments is part of the portfolio. I'm Chair of the Property Investment Board, which has been established by Cabinet to make recommendations on property investment and acquisitions. We have 3 major projects that we're working on. Westgate, the Council House site known as Eastgate, and the redevelopment of Mell Square. Work on these projects is progressing well, and I will continue to have oversight of their progress. Final report to hopefully give the go-ahead for Westgate will be presented to Cabinet in the autumn. The Scrutiny Board will also be aware that I chair the Council's Remuneration Committee. In this role, I aim to ensure that all our employment policies and practices are fair, comprehensive and up to date. I also have oversight of the sickness levels at the Council and the measures that we have taken to manage sickness. This, I know, will be of interest to the Scrutiny Board in their work programme going forward. I have Cabinet Member responsibility for health and safety, and in last year's annual health and safety report, I was pleased to see a new action plan outlining measures for how we might improve our health and safety arrangements. And again, Madam Chair, I'll be monitoring progress against this action plan. On procurement, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've made a number of changes to our procurement practices to assist our suppliers. This has included changing all payment terms to immediate and working on an open book arrangement with a number of suppliers. I will continue to ensure that our procurement arrangements are supportive to suppliers in these clearly difficult circumstances. On the issue of debt collection, due to COVID-19, I approved the suspension of all debt recovery activity on the 30th of June 2020. I now need to work with the Director of Resource and Deputy Chief Executive to agree how we ease debt recovery back, whilst recognising the difficulties our residents are facing. As in previous years, I'll receive quarterly reports on debt collection going forward. There have been a number of schemes that government have announced during this pandemic crisis. I recently approved an amendment to our local council tax support scheme to award additional support of up to £150 per annum to each claimant. I'll be reviewing the council tax support scheme to check that it provides the right level of assistance to our residents whilst remaining affordable to the council. A further initiative from the government was discretionary rate relief. Throughout the year, I will consider applications for discretionary rate relief from small organisations within the borough. As in previous years, decisions will be based on the extent to which relief would make a significant difference to the organisation's finances. I'll now move to our digital strategy, Madam Chair. We have a comprehensive digital strategy in place which aims to expand the range of digital channels for providing services. This strategy needs to be refreshed based on the learning from COVID-19, but also needs to recognise that accessing services by digital means is, of course, not for everyone. Liquid Logic, I'm grateful for the Scrutiny Board's oversight on the implementation of Liquid Logic. Like everyone, I'll be keen to see the implementation reach its conclusion with full implementation in children's services by the end of this year, and also to see that this major project will have been delivered within the budget we have set. Oracle Cloud, our next major project, is the implementation of Oracle Cloud. This affects the majority of the services in the Resources Directorate. It affects how we pay our suppliers, it affects how we pay our staff and councillors, and is the backbone of our corporate systems. Like the Scrutiny Board, I'll be paying close attention to progress with the implementation. On other ICT projects, the previous arrangement for approving IT projects will continue into 2021, in that no spend on a major ICT project has been incurred without first presenting a report to one of my decision sessions for approval. And finally, Madam Chair, we have agreed that we will adopt a corporate landlord model for all our property assets. Property will now be managed corporately rather than by individual directorates, leaving them to get on with providing services. I'll be receiving regular updates on the implementation of this corporate model. That ends the report, Madam Chair, and as I've said, we will take questions, and obviously I'm supported by officers if the need arises.
Thank you very much, Bob. That was an excellent report. I'll open it immediately to anyone who has any questions, please. Councillor Gough, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask you, Bob, regarding the digital strategy versus the future office needs for the staff. Bearing in mind that staff have been working from home, and I would say quite successfully over the last few months, is that something that the council are looking at doing in the future, possibly having less office-based staff and potentially staff that can be able to work from home?
No matter I've discussed at this point in time. Perhaps I'll pass you over to Paul Johnson, who might be able to advise us. Paul, can you do so?
I can. Thanks, Councillor Slade. We are working on, it's probably the wrong name for the strategy, because we're working on a return to work strategy, but it might be a not return to work strategy, because we have been, as you say, it has been quite successful. Productivity has been really good. Sickness levels are the lowest they've ever been. And people are saving costs in travel, carbon emissions are less. So there's lots of advantages, of lots of learning from the current situation, which we are building into a new way of working. So we're definitely going to look for that to be a permanent feature of how our employees work in the future, and be more flexible. So good for us as an employer, and a better offer for the employees as well.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any more questions? Wasmer, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just this question is regards to the financial implications of COVID-19 and its impact. I just wanted to have some assurance on how these risks are actually being looked at, or whether there is a specific risk management strategy is in place to mitigate these risks. Thank you.
I think, again, I'll pass over to Paul in that regard to the risk register.
Yeah, thank you. So the report that went to Cabinet last week, quite a comprehensive report on all the financial risks from COVID and how we built those up. There was quite a significant section, well, there are two significant sections in the report, one on sensitivity analysis to look at how the figures might move based on various assumptions, but more importantly, a number of mitigations that we can look at now to actually try and deal with this very, very challenging financial position. So this £18 million deficit effectively becomes more or less the medium-term financial strategy now. This is what we monitor against. Officers will be monitoring very rigorously, as you can imagine, with regular reports to Cabinet. But there are a number of things that we can do. The first one is lobbying government for more funding. But we have a budget strategy reserve. We have a business rates windfall, which are there for other reasons. But if there's an emergency, then they can be used for this purpose. And because we plan our finances over a 3-year period, then we can probably recover this position over 3 years as well. And that's the principle that we work to through our financial strategy. So yes, it's a very, very big number and a very worrying number. But one part of the report that I wrote, obviously, was the finance director to give a view on whether this was a crisis for the authority. And my view was, no, it isn't. It's worrying and it's significant, but it's not a crisis.
Right, thank you. I've got Peter Davis, then Maggie and Alan. Can I just see if there's anyone else who's indicating? No. In that case, Councillor Davis, please. And I'm sorry, welcome, Councillor Brown. It's nice to see you. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Bob, can you just expand a little bit on what you mean by corporate landlord model?
Well, I will pass over to Officer in a moment. But all of the property assets used to be within the hands of each of the directorates, but they've now been centralised. I think that's the general principle. Paul, that's the position, isn't it, at this point in time?
In a nutshell, so we had managers who were providing services, managing buildings where we've got property experts within the council. So let's let the property experts manage the buildings and let the managers concentrate on providing services.
Very much.
Thank you. Councillor Maggie Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The £18 million deficit that we've got, have we got enough reserves to make sure it doesn't become a big problem for us? Is one question. I do have another, but
so shall I just so in essence, as the director said, we have the corporate reserve within the authority, and we also have the business rate windfall reserve within the authority. And I think the point that should not be missed, as the director said, he has considered whether the position of the authority is so serious that we'd have to declare a section 114. And the report that went to Cabinet said, in his opinion at this point in time, that is not the case because of the way we actually manage the funds and also the funds that we have in place. And I think the other point that he makes is over the 3-year budget period, we believe we will be able to recover. We won't lose sight of the fact, of course, along with all local authorities, I would assume nationally, we have now identified the potential in-year cost, the full in-year cost, and it is about £18 million more than we've had. And therefore, it's essential that we collectively do lobby government to basically refund us for some of those costs. And we're not the only authority, quite clearly, within this position. There's been substantial loss of income, as I'm sure you'd be aware. There's been substantial budget pressures within individual directorates, not least in adult social care and children's services, and of course those continue, and rightly so. So government did give us funding through a number of grants, Section 31 monies, but obviously as time progresses, we do need to seek recovery from government in that regard. But equally, and I think the point is that we have reserves, and that's what they're there for at the end of the day, and we'll be able to maintain, with the use of those reserves and some extra help from government, hopefully a position that takes us forward within the terms of the 3-year medium-term financial strategy. Perhaps I'll pass over to Paul. He might be able to add any further.
I think the Cabinet members covered most of it. The only thing I would add is that the figure has to agree with the return that we're required to make to the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government every month. So we declare our losses. Part of those losses are the business rates windfall monies that we would get, and now we think we won't, but we haven't committed that money anyway. So probably a quarter of that 18 million is funds that we say we have lost. So as far as making a case to government, we've lost that money, but as far as it impacting on the council's finances, we haven't committed it anyway.
thank you both very much. Thank you. I do have one more question, Councillor Wild, if I may.
I'm inviting you to go ahead with your question.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. It's just a digital strategy. I suppose this question actually would come out when we look at the detail of it, but the problem is, of course, that we do have lots of residents in the borough who are not digitally can't access digital sort of the digital technology, and presumably our strategy will be something to do with helping them and making sure that they don't miss out because of that.
Am I okay to pick that up?
Yeah, yes, you certainly are. I just want some help when my microphone is on and off. I forget. I think you can all hear me, so I'm sorry, Paul. Please.
Yeah,
please go.
I think part of it is we're still gathering information on, particularly from adult social care, children's services on their experiences over the last 12 weeks. So there's information gathered that will feed into an update to the strategy to be brought to the Scrutiny board, and we don't know what that will say yet. But the digital strategy has 4 parts to it, and one of those elements is absolutely to recognise that digital isn't for everybody, and what we can't do is design access away to services by making them too digital. So there's the digital inclusion part. So those that don't currently access services digitally, let's see if we can help them too. But if they still don't want to, then don't make any sort of channel of communication totally digital, because that will exclude people.
Yeah, I did make that point that we recognise that digital is not fit for everyone, and obviously it will come back to scrutiny as the strategy progresses, and I'm sure Scrutiny will be making that point. Looking at my list, that's coming back to you sometime in September, as far as I'm led to understand. So I'm sure that's an opportunity. But it's a point well made, because we all know, we've all been forced in some ways into doing all of this. It's not been my normal day job, to be fair, and it's a big learning curve, but I think we get there. But quite clearly, it presents its challenges, even for some of our members. So we'll keep reviewing it.
Thank you both very much. Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate Paul and his team, please. Did you pick up on the fact that Paul does not think that this, I'm sure he thinks it's serious, but it is not, we're not critical. That's if I've got it, if I've remembered what's just been said. And I actually think the fact that we're not, that financially we can get through it, hopefully, is actually down to Paul's management, his team's management. In preceding years, not just the COVID, the fact that Solihull is so well managed and financially very well balanced. So thank you, Paul. I do put that fact down to you, but we will have to watch this £18 million excess that this time last year we were not anticipating. So there we are. Has everybody finished with that item? Are there any other speakers? Can't see anyone. No? Okay. So perhaps we can move on now to item 6.
I leave now, Chairman.
Yes, I was going to say, would you like to leave, Bob? Yes, you can. Thank you. I love this bit of power, you see, when I can give you permission to leave. It's wonderful. Right, now this is agenda item 6 on page 13. And the of this report is to provide the resources and delivering value scrutiny board with a draft work programme for the 2020-21 municipal year for review and for approval. So sorry, you don't see my ceiling, do you? Stay. If we move over then to page 14, and which officer would like Paul Johnson? Would you like discussion, or is it another officer?
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I was just going to quickly introduce the report.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chairman, and just to advise members that obviously the work programme will form the basis of future work for the 2020-21 municipal year. Officers have obviously brought over actions and further reports identified from the previous municipal year's meeting cycle, and that's all been captured in this draft work programme. And as members are aware, the work programme is reviewed regularly, so any changing priorities can be captured, and indeed the order of topics identified in this draft work programme may be moved as members see fit, and based on the advice from officers. So that's all I have to say, Madam Chairman, and it's really for members to review and to comment. Thank you.
It is. And I open this immediately, please, to anyone who wishes to comment on what I think is a very thorough work plan, particularly when you look at the timeline and the dates there. They're very apt. But please do feel free to indicate, and I'll bring you in. Well, I can only assume that we have cracked it. We have perfection in front of us. Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Gough, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I couldn't let the whole agenda item moved without actually anybody saying anything. So I'd just like to say, I'm more than happy with the things that are being covered in the programme. We seem to have captured, the main things what are happening at the moment. There's the COVID-19 in there, obviously the town centre redevelopment strategy plan. So I'm more than happy to support this. Thank you, Chair.
Is anyone else? Does anyone else wish to point? Right. Well, let's look at what we've actually been asked to do. We're asked to consider the topics detailed in Appendix 1 to this report and approve the work programme for the 2020-21. Now, bearing in mind that we only had half an idea of what the Cabinet member was going to say, in view of listening to him, and he made a very, very thorough presentation, is there anything on this work programme that you would like to pick up on at all? I'll give you a couple of minutes to go through it in light of the previous presentation. I've got Maggie indicating. So is there anyone else? Paul Rogers, that is. There isn't anyone else, is there?
Madam Chairman, I can see no other members indicating.
Thank you. Maggie, please.
Thank you, Kate. I am presuming that any information that we get from government about any further funding that we're going to get will be in amongst this lot somewhere, with the financial, financial implications of COVID-19, I presume. Mind you, that's now. So, but later on, presumably that information will be brought to the board. And of course, the other thing is that we are able to add to the work and change it around anyway, aren't we? If something comes up that we all feel that we need to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Paul Johnson, would you like to respond to that question, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Allen. So the item 7 on page 18 on the 14th of September, that will include a full update on the financial implications of COVID, including any additional government funding. But if there are any significant announcements before then we can add that to the July meeting. You're absolutely right. If Paul doesn't mind me covering the other point, you're absolutely right about being able to move it around. And you will see that in working with Paul on this, we've left a spare meeting anyway in November because things always come up. So we didn't think it was appropriate to completely fill the agenda. So there is the opportunity.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
In view of Bob's presentation to us, that I think I would like to see somewhere. We don't actually have to fix it tonight, but the effect on the workers, the work style that they will be doing. And I would imagine that it comes partly under sickness absence because Adrian Cattell is head of HR. But I do think we need somewhere here where we can actually have a report brought to us about the effects of COVID on our workforce and the management of our workforce. If you don't agree with me, please just say so. But if it's something that you think perhaps we should be looking at, can you, Wasma, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I support your view on that, Chair, because I think it's important to have an overview of our of the council workforce and supporting and maximising the potential of the council workforce. And I think it's important, and if it should be part of that programme, I think it would be a good work programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Wasma. Is there anyone else? So Paul Rogers now I'm referring to. Sorry, my fingers there. Bad teacher habit always.
Sam's waving like mad, Kate.
Is that the what's waving?
Samantha is waving like mad.
You're not on my right, Samantha. You're on the edge of the screen. Please.
Yes, it was just to come into the point that you were saying around the impacts for staff. We have got about the asset master plan coming next month to the meeting. Actually, we can't really discuss that without talking about the impacts COVID's had on that piece of work, that naturally then leads to some of the impacts on staff because of what we've done in mobilising really people to work from home en masse. So that report is currently being drafted. I've been working on it today, and there is a section that we're building in around that. So we will be incorporating views from the head of HR. We'll also be incorporating Paul Langham's view as to how it impacted from IT as well. So it's sort of widening the net, not just about the progress in that key programme, which actually has been impacted in what it could do during this period anyway, because of that focus on response.
Thank you, Sam. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I think our staff are our biggest asset with any company. It's their staff. So I do want to see this. It seems to me that if we've got a master plan, we need to include that. That's probably an appropriate place. I know that you're going to have HR and IT there. I just wondered if it was possible, and Adrian Cattell will know this, whether we could have an interim report on sickness absence, because Paul Johnson said one of the spin-offs of all of this was that our sickness absence rate was the lowest that it had been for some considerable years. And whilst we're looking at managing our staff and working from home, everything that COVID-19 has brought, I really think, I know here's the proper report in December from Adrian, but I do think we do need to have an interim report on sickness absence so that we can discuss that in the light of managing our assets. Would that be possible, Sam, please?
Incorporate sickness into that report if that helps, or if you wanted a separate report on sickness.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that I wanted a full separate report like I keep forgetting his name, Adrian does do, but I think if we had an interim that we could bring to bear when we're discussing the work for the actual methods of working for staff, I think that would have add some light, please.
Okay, certainly can build that into, yes.
Right, thank you. Is there anyone else? Because it's been a fairly short meeting. Maybe we should move our meetings to having them virtual meetings and we finish them. Then you're all at home anyway, you don't have to go home. Right, thank you very much. I'll close this meeting at 18:37, please. Is everybody comfortable with that? Thank you. Enjoy the rest of this lovely summer's evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.
So just you and I now, Paul.
We're